Hi, this is Kaery with Kaery Concealed in the Active Self-Protection Extra channel. And today, this is part 3 of a 2-year review process that I like to go through and look at what I've done. This time, we're going to be talking about how I look at the courses I've taken and books I've read, any training that I've had, and how I incorporate that into what I'm doing in the next couple years.
This is not a paid endorsement, but I am a brand ambassador for Heckler and Koch for a reason. HK firearms are incredibly high quality, and when it's time to step up out of the entry tier, they're the only ones I recommend. You carry a gun just in case. Shouldn't it be an HK just in case?
Well, this is so I realized a few minutes ago that it's taking me significantly longer to explain what I do than to actually just do it. So I usually only spend about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours max, every 2 years going through what we've talked about the past 2 weeks and then this week. So it makes it seem long and cumbersome to explain it, kind of like a use of force encounter. It takes much longer to explain it than for the actual few seconds that the event happened in. So I like to evaluate the books I've read, the courses I've taken as a student, and that allows me to figure out what I want to review from those things, what I want to take next, and how to incorporate those things into any of my teaching or expert witness work, that sort of thing. So as far as courses I have taken and the course notes that I have taken from courses I've attended, I know that there are lots of people that say that if you're taking notes during a course, you're not learning. And I understand that. For me, that's the way it used to be, actually. I don't know what's happened to me in my old age, but I have an issue now where if I don't write down what the instructor's talking about, I'm not going to remember it, like not at all. Maybe general principle, not even general principles half the time. So that's one of the reasons I try to take good notes. Oftentimes people will see me taking notes in a class and they'll ask me, do you even review the notes you take? Yes, I do, a lot and often. And they help me a ton for expert witness work that I do, for even developing curriculum. Even when I have a question about something, I'm able to go back and look at it again. So I have a color system that I use only, again, for the classes that I've taken and the notes I've taken in those classes. I have a color system that I use for Post-it notes, little tabs on the sides, and highlighters. And the color system is orange is anything that's essential that I really want to go back to. Blue is anything that's identifying or highlighting something that might help me explain something for the expert witness work I do. Pink is anything about teaching methodology. Perhaps it's general principles or instructional design, those sorts of things. And then green is anything that's like specifically firearm related, grip essentials, specific drills, those sorts of things. And so when I'm reviewing my notes from a course, I use highlighters to highlight those things just as I review them so that I can organize it and find it easily, and I use those colors to identify that. So I recently went through this course and I was looking for some teaching methodology and instructional methodology that this particular instructor talked about, and so that's why all the pink tabs are there. I don't leave these here. Once I glean what I want to from that and review them again, then I'll remove the tabs. The other thing I do with my courses that I have taken is I did not used to do this until I started doing expert witness work, but I encourage everyone that does any training now. Masada Yub has a way that he explains and encourages students to make copies of all their training notes and their training certificates and mail a copy of them to themselves, leave it in a sealed envelope, that sort of thing, and don't open them so that you have a way to use those in court. I'm not doing it for that. I'm doing it for, the reason I want to keep such good track of my hours and the courses I've taken is it's necessary for the expert witness work. Often when they're going to decide whether or not, when the court decides whether or not that particular court will allow you to be an expert witness on that topic in that court, in that jurisdiction, they want to know what training you've had. And so I have a CV that has all of the courses that I've taken and the hours and who taught the course and where the course was at and the dates. And I also have the certificates for any of the courses I've taken. Now, lots of courses don't give certificates out. I've found that out over the years, but I never had that list or a binder of my course certificates until I started doing the expert witness work. And that was not fun to go back and reconstruct. I'm just telling you, that was not fun. And I still find things, I still come across things that I'm like, oh man, did I put that on my CV? I don't know if I did or not. And then I go look, and sometimes I have and sometimes I haven't. So I would encourage you now, any of you, I never thought I'd do expert witness work either, but I think it's a great idea to have a list of all the courses that you've taken, the date you took them, and then even a course description I think is kind of helpful as well, but certainly the number of hours. And then if you have a binder that you can put your course certificates in, I think that's a great thing to do also, just to keep them together. I've never been asked to take my binder to court with me, but I have had to review my CV before at length, and that's so boring. I felt so bad for everyone there had to listen to all that. Anyway, so that's how I use, that's what I do with the courses that I've taken. I also, so a classroom-based course where we're not going to go out on the range at all, I often will use full-size sheets of paper, that sort of thing, to take notes on. But on a course that's a range-based course, I like to use these little notebooks here. And these are sewn binding notebooks. And I like to use them because I can turn them and write this way, long-wise, or I can do it this way. And there's plenty of pages in there, and they're just handy. They don't usually ever go bad or that sort of thing. Sometimes I put, oh, here's a, must be my drill times for that particular course. I didn't know I had that in there. Anyway, it's kind of fun to go back and look through these things, but these are the types of notebooks I use for on-the-range type learning, because they withstand weather pretty well. And I could, like this one, I just folded up and put it in my back pocket, which made it pretty easy, but it stayed together nicely. I can still read my writing, that sort of thing. Then for books that I've read, what do I do about books I've read? Well, I do like to keep a list of books that I've read. I don't use the color codes for the books, though. The color codes I mentioned, those are just mine for my course notes that I've taken. The books that I read, I do like to keep a list of those. Well, have you ever bought a book that you already owned? You just forgot you owned it? Yeah, that happened to me. But I learned if you buy them only happened once, so that I can remember. I learned, though, if you buy them on Amazon, Amazon will remind you, hey, you bought this book already. Did you know that? Which is very nice. But I do like to keep a list of the books that I've read. And then when I'm reading a book, I will often put a tab somewhere, or I'll put Post-it notes in the book that will remind me of where I want to go back to and review it later on when I'm done. I often will put some Post-it notes in the front of a book so I can just peel these off and use them as I'm reading the book, because I don't usually read at my desk necessarily. So do I keep all the books? Somebody asked me that the other day. Do I keep all the books that I read? I do keep all the books that I read pertaining to expert witness work that I think will help me for that. And there are a number of them that I think help with that. Like Street Survival is an example of one. This one is an example of, and I will keep these, and I underline them and dog-ear them and make a big mess of them. But especially if I quote them in an expert witness report. Like here's the most recent report I did. Don't you feel sorry for the sucker that has to read this? I shouldn't say sucker. He's not a sucker. I just feel so bad for the person who has to read this, because that's a lot. But Jamie Borden, who has testified in several hundred cases, explains that a 2 or 3 second incident, 4 second incident can, depending on the facts of the case, can sometimes take 100 pages to explain. And I have 2 cases right now that are pretty complex as far as the different factors involved, and so it required a lot of explaining. But anyway, a book that I am going to use, and I'm going to quote it in an expert witness report, I definitely keep that book so that I can always go back to that and look at it and have that information in case I want to check the quote and verify it, make sure that's accurate, make sure that I cite the correct page that it's on in the report, that sort of thing. But I have books that I use for expert witness work. I have books that I enjoy for teaching purposes. For example, Super Courses by Ken Bain, great book. Miss Ashley told me about this one a couple years ago, and a fabulous book. If you guys have been in ASPIC, Active Self-Protection Instructor Certification, this is a great book. I didn't make too big of a mess out of it, just lots of colored ink all over it. But great information in this book. I think as good as what the best college teachers do, to be quite honest. I have books that I get that help me, I think they help me. I'm not a designer. Natalie Widener is a designer. That girl has a designer's eye. I'm not one, and so I'm always grateful for books that help me learn how to build better presentations for teaching. So I think that's about it. I think that's about all I do for the review of my course notes and books. I don't ever review anything in its entirety. I am usually reviewing my course notes for looking for a specific piece of information that I knew was discussed in a course, that sort of thing. So I would love to hear whether or not you take notes and how you use them if you do. If you have a great method for taking notes, that'd be great. I never learned a note-taking methodology, so I just write down as much stuff as I possibly can. Sometimes it's great and sometimes it's not great. But I'd love to hear how you keep track of the books you've read and the notes that you've taken, and I hope this has been beneficial for you. I hope you've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed being able to share it with you. Part of the reason I shared it with you is because I wish somebody would have shared this type of thing with me when I first started learning about firearms and learning how to protect myself, because I would have done a much better job of keeping a list of the courses I've taken and a list of the books I've read and that sort of thing. Those things could be really helpful to us later on and save us a lot of heartache from trying to rebuild them. So thanks for spending your time with me today. I look forward to seeing you next week.